Hola, it's Jessica here. I want to share with you how I made this pencil pouch and box pouch. I made this for a 12-year-old girl. I just find that at that tween age, sometimes it's hard to find stuff, or a teenager age, but something practical that they can use that will be cute for school is a good option. Also, I threw in those pillows in the background because I think fur pillows are really cute, and a small fur pillow for a teenager would be a good option. So check out that video if you want to know how I made those. So to make the pencil pouch and the box pouch, it's very similar steps. The box pouch just has a few extra steps, but each step will be in order so that you can make both together. Please don't forget to thumb it, sub it, speak it, and spread it. Let's get into it. For both projects, I ended up using a stretch denim for the outer fabric and the tabs, and then for the lining, I wanted something that could be wiped down, so I went with the vinyl. Then I had two invisible zippers that measured about 15 inches. I'm going to end up cutting those down, but if you're going to buy them, you do need a 10-inch and a 14-inch zipper. Starting with the pencil pouch, you're going to need a 10 by 10 inch square for your outer fabric. The lining needs to be 10 by 11 inches, 10 inches height and 11 inches wide. That extra inch is going to come into play. We're going to cut the lining in half and then sew it together, so that's 2.5 inches to create that extra inch. Then you're going to need a 3-inch by 12-inch strip that will become the bow at the end of this. For the box pouch, you are going to need a 14 by 14 inch outer fabric and then a 14 by 15 inch lining, and again that's going to be cut in half and sewn together, as well as a 3-inch by 8-inch strip of fabric, and that will become 2 tabs for your box as well as your zipper. Alright, some helpful tips if you're needing to iron this denim or the vinyl. For the denim, I did face down, and then I laid a scrap piece of cotton on top and had my iron on a higher heat. Then I sprayed it with water. Essentially, I'm just steaming the fabric underneath. For the vinyl, make sure that your ironing board is cooled down a little bit. Do the same technique, however, when you spray the water, you don't want to leave the iron on the vinyl for long, so even if you don't get the wet spots out of the cotton, that's fine. And then give it a second before you move on to continue ironing out the wrinkles, because essentially what you're doing is you're heating up this plastic and almost melting it, so you don't want to take it too far and really warp the fabric. You just want to iron out the wrinkles, let it cool, and then continue to iron if need be. Continuing with the cutting, we're going to need to cut the tabs and cut our lining in half for both the pencil pouch and the box pouch. Double check your math before you cut. It should be 5.5 inches wide by 10 inches in length for your pencil pouch. For your box pouch, cut the lining in half, giving you two 7.5-inch wide by 14-inch length rectangles. And then cut that 3-inch by 8-inch strip of denim for your box pouch in half, giving you two rectangles that measure 4 inches by 3 inches. Since I'm working with vinyl, I cannot use straight pins. I have to use clips, because once you pierce through vinyl, that hole stays there permanently. Going back to the pencil pouch, we're going to put the linings right sides together and we're going to sew down that 10-inch length, but we have to leave a 3-inch opening. Be sure to mark that so that you don't sew that closed, because we need that to flip the entire project right side out at the end. Now for the bow part of the pencil pouch, I'm going to put right sides together, and then I'm going to sew along the side, the open end, and down the side, however, leaving a 1.5-inch opening to flip it around. Do the same for the box pouch, and then for the tabs, we're going to fold them in half to create a 3-inch by 2-inch rectangle, and then we're going to sew the sides down. Clip the corners from that bow strip for the pencil pouch, and then clip the corners on the tabs for the box pouch. Then flip them right sides out. You can choose to finger press them or to iron them, but make sure that your seams are pushed out, and then we're going to top stitch these down. So this is up to you. I ended up using an embroidery thread as my top stitch thread because that's what's going to be shown, and I just liked all the colors. And yes, I was crazy and I switched out my thread every time I went from assembling it to top stitching it. Embroidery thread is a lot lighter and thinner, so I definitely didn't want that in the construction of the bag, but I did want it to show on my top stitches. For the 2 tabs for the box pouch, you just need to stitch 3 sides, leaving that open raw edge side alone because that's going to be stitched away. For the pencil pouch bow, you will need to stitch all the way around. For your lining, go ahead and give it a good finger press. I pushed the seam to the left, pushed it to the right, and then opened it and pushed it flat, just giving it a good little finger press. At this time, you'll be able to see that your outer fabric and your lining will be the same size. Place your outer fabric right sides up, and then you want to lay your zipper right sides down. How you know if it's the right or wrong side is whatever side that little toggle is on the head of the zipper is your right side. So you want to lay that right sides touching and line it up so that it is on the outer fabric and the top edges are lined up. Because it was cotton, I pinned the zipper to the outer fabric on the back side, and then I laid the lining on top, and then I went through and clipped them, removing the pins and using the clips to hold everything together. When you place your lining on top of the outer fabric, it is going to be right sides touching. However, the lining isn't going to be on the right side of the zipper, but don't worry about that. And you also have to make sure that your seam that was sewn into your lining is parallel to your zipper. It's important that your outer fabric and your lining are lined up. I switched my foot on my machine to a narrow zipper foot, but you can use a normal zipper foot, or if you are skilled enough, you can just use your regular utility foot. So then I just turned it so wrong sides were touching. I finger pressed it so that that seam I sewed with the zipper is flat, and I clipped it so that it would stay flat. I want to top stitch it so that it won't buckle up and it looks professionally done. Also, if you're working with vinyl, you might find that the vinyl will stick to that metal plate on your sewing machine. The easiest trick is get an easy water soluble like material such as tissue paper, or I use toilet paper. You just lay that on the machine, then lay the vinyl on top of it, and it will glide right through. If there's any little pieces of tissue paper stuck in the seam after you pull up the tissue paper, then just get a little dab of water and rub it out and you're done. Forgot to mention I had unzipped the zipper to top stitch it. So now you want to close the zipper so that you can make sure that your sides will line up, and we are going to sew on the other side of the zipper. So all you're going to do is fold your outer fabric with right sides touching itself and line it up to the other edge, opposite edge of the zipper that you had just sewn. And again, I'm going to throw in a few pins on the outside of the fabric, then flip it around and fold the lining on itself so right sides are touching. Line that up and then clip and take out the pins and just clip everything so that nothing shifts. And so after you sew it, it'll look like this. Flip it so right sides are out. Finger press that seam down so that you can top stitch it, and again use clips to make sure that it doesn't unroll. To do this top stitch, I did lay the tissue paper down and place it in the machine so that the connected part of the zipper was done first, then it just opened and was easier to sew as I finished. So here's how it looks, and again you're going to have to turn it wrong sides out so that you have a separate outer fabric and a separate lining. Using the seam you sewed in the lining fabric as a guide, line that up with the center of the zipper. Once you have that lined up, you'll be able to line up the outer fabric on the opposite side to be equal so that it'll all be centered. I added clips to the outside to hold the lining and the outer fabric together so that they are even on the sides. Once I had everything centered, I went ahead and added the bow part of my pencil pouch. What I did was fold that strip in half, and on the side of the outer fabric, so not the side of the lining, the side of the outer fabric, I added that in between the zipper and the outer fabric, and I pinned that or clipped that in place. Here's a huge thing to check. Check where the head of your zipper is. Now, I don't know how many times I've sewn things and sewed the head of the zipper outside, and you kind of need that to open and close the zipper. So at this point, when you have everything situated, check where the head of the zipper is. Although I purposefully left the zipper out until this point, it is an easy step to forget and just begin sewing, especially if you're learning how to sew. So make sure you check where the head of the zipper is, and if it's on the outside like it's shown here, you want to unzip the zipper so that it's towards the center of your project. That might require unpinning or unclipping things, but I did do that on purpose because I like to have everything even and like situated, and then I know when I unzip it that it is going to be centered, because when you unzip a zipper, sometimes things just move and gaps begin to form. You want to make sure that everything is lined up. If I didn't say it before, everything I'm doing is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance following the edge of the fabric, and be careful going over the zipper. If you have trouble with your machine, you might consider like a hump jump to keep your foot flat and get over the tabs or that bow. I don't really need one for my machine, but I do like to use it just because it makes it way easier for my machine. I don't have to worry about bending or breaking any needles. So for the pencil pouch, I went ahead and clipped the corners. I could go ahead and clip the zipper and any extra seam allowance to remove bulk. So the difference comes in this step when you are trying to center the zipper. Since it's a bigger pouch, you're probably going to have to open the zipper before you pin everything down. You'll need to add the tabs to each side of your box pouch. However, you need to add it to the side between the zipper and the outer fabric. So after you sew across each end, just like you did for the pencil pouch, remember to check where the head of the zipper is before you do this. It should be at minimum halfway down your project. You're just going to notch out the corners. So I cut out 1.5 inches from each corner. Repeat for all 4 corners. You can also clip the seam allowance or any zipper that's left sticking out. Now this next step is going to be tricky and awkward, but it's going to look really cool and finished with the very clean lines inside because the raw edges are sewn into it and not shown. So you have to pull the outer fabric so that box you notched out becomes a straight line. I use clips at this point just to help keep it where I needed it to be so that I can move on to the lining. And then I have to line up the lining part of it, line up the corners and match them. You're gonna have to push and maneuver the fabric all around the inside until it lays flat. And if you were to split this new line in half, make sure it's an even distance on both sides. However, you are going to have a point on the center of your little notch here, and that's okay because that point is coming from like where the zipper is being sewn. That is a good thing. And I stood with a 1/2 inch seam allowance through this whole thing. I did do a double stitch, which is just back forth on every single stitch on my machine, just to reinforce the corners because that's where it gets a lot of the pressure, but it's not necessary. So you're going to repeat this for all 4 corners. And yes, when you sew one side and one corner, the opposite side is going to be a little bit more trickier, so you're just going to have to take your time and maneuver the fabric. And you can cut any excess seam allowance that is there, or if any of the corners are sticking out. You also want to give a little clip to the corners just to remove bulk. On your lining side, you're going to stick your hand in through the 3-inch opening that you left and pull out the outer fabric. This is why the zipper needs to be about halfway through your project so that you can just turn everything inside out. If your zipper is kind of closed, it's going to be really hard to maneuver that zipper open so that you can turn your project right side out. We still need to sew the 3-inch opening closed. What I did was open the zipper, pulled out the lining and the outer fabric so that I don't accidentally sew the outer fabric. Then I went ahead and just lined up the lining so that I can top stitch that 3-inch opening closed using a 1/8 seam allowance. I just want to show you how beautiful these corners come out when they're sewn in together. A lot of the times you have trouble with the corners fitting, and this just looks perfect. Let me show you why on the inside of this sewing it is so much better to do it this way. You're not going to have any raw edges. It's going to look professional. No one will know that it wasn't bought, and when you tell them, you get to brag on your skills. So now for the hand stitching, I went ahead and used the embroidery thread that I would been using for the top stitch. What I did was do a basting stitch on the bottom half of this bow strip. Then I pulled it together and then I tied a few knots with that tail. Then I went towards the back side of the bow and I went up that second top strip and did a basting stitch, pulled it together and tied a knot. Then I went all the way through the front to the back and just looped and looped all the way from to the back until all of that tail is gone. Then I tied like 3 knots, tucked it in on itself, and I created a cute little bow. All it needs is a press and you are good to go. I found these cute adorable pencils in the dollar section at Target. Pick a fun fabric and any teen or tween would love this. Thank you so much for watching. God bless. Merry Christmas.
Bye. Mommy, I'm a spin.